Okay, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We're really glad to be joined by Simon Kuper. Uh, he's the author of a great new book, World Cup Fever, a soccer journey through 9 tournaments. Just a couple things before we get started. Our format today is we'll talk with Simon for about, say, 30, 40 minutes, see how it goes. And then afterwards, we'll be glad to take some questions. Just want to give you a heads up on future talks. We'll be talking with author sociologist Paul Dross about his new book, Forging Identity, about the artist Carlos Neubach uh, and his work in the Detroit area. And we'll also be talking in April 14th. If you're a fan of the Parks and Recreation TV show, we'll be talking with the author Jennifer Armstrong. She's written a book about how it came to be. So please take a look at our website, div1library.org, for all the future information. So Mr. Simon Kuper is the author of the New York Times bestseller Soccernomics. He was born in Uganda, South African parents, and moved to the Netherlands as a child. He studied history and German at Oxford University and attended Harvard University as a Kennedy Scholar. He's a journalist for the Financial Times and has written for The Observer, the Times, London, and The Guardian. So thank you very much, Simon. I really appreciate you joining us this afternoon, or may I say this evening, in Paris there.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, I really enjoyed the your World Cup Fever book. I've always had an interest in soccer. I played it for several years as a young kid. Why did you write this book?
Well, I'm in the unusual situation that I've been to 9 World Cups. I've been to every World Cup starting in Italy 1990, where I went as a fan. All the others I've done as a journalist for my newspaper, the Financial Times. And the World Cup is really a story about the world. You know, every World Cup is the story of the host country. The host country kind of goes on a journey with itself. Who are we? What face do we want to show the world? Of course, some of the most famous moments of the history of soccer by players like Maradona and Pelé and Cruyff happen at World Cups. It's not the best soccer necessarily, certainly not anymore. Club soccer at the top level is better than World Cups. World Cups just mean more. World Cups unite a country. There's nothing where the whole world is watching like World Cups. And sort of having been inside the belly of the beast so many times, I wanted to tell a story of my experiences, you know, from the Amazon to Tokyo, and try and ask, what does it all mean? Why do people care so much?
Yeah, it was one of the chapters in your Soccernomics book's 2022 edition talks about suicides after are there suicides after the country's team loss, and it just I was just wow, such passion, such that was like wow.
Yeah, in Soccernomics, we found actually World Cups reduce suicides. So the story is, you know, when the team loses, disappointed fans jump off buildings. That's not true. Actually, World Cups make people less lonely. World Cups are everybody's watching the same program on TV, just like they did 30 years ago, but something that doesn't exist anymore now that we're all on our own devices. So in countries like England or Brazil or Cameroon, the whole country is watching the same thing, talking about the same things. Even if you're a lonely person, you can get drawn into this community of your country. And so World Cups make people feel more connected to each other. It's this power they have that nothing else in the modern world does.
Well, maybe we should talk about how it all came about. Who was Jules Rimet?
Yeah, so Jules Rimet was president of FIFA, the global soccer authority, for nearly 40 years, from the end of World War One until the 50s. And Jules Rimet is a Frenchman. He's fought in World War One. He spent 4 years at the front. It's a miracle he survived. He won three Croix de Guerre, the French Medal for Bravery. And, I live in France, so I was able to kind of dig out the very little that's known about this guy, almost all of it in French. So living in Paris in that way was an advantage for me. And Jules Rimet, as president of FIFA in the late 20s, he creates the World Cup, which has been a dream of FIFA since the beginning to do a World Cup. And the first World Cup in Uruguay in 1930, from then it's always been the case that the host country pays. So Uruguay has to pay for the stadiums. They even pay for a boat to bring all the European teams and Jules Rimet over together. So Jules Rimet creates the World Cup as we now know it. And he sees it as this kind of way to bring peace between peoples, and especially between French and Germans, which is, the great geopolitical enmity of his day that has caused all these wars.
Well, he fought for many years. I had like 4 years at the
Yeah, the
front,
whole World War
World War
One, the guy
One.
was at the front. I found this photograph of him. He's a French officer, in this beautiful uniform in this muddy trench at the front, surrounded by black men. So who were these black men? They were West African riflemen from the French Empire, recruited by France to fight at the World Cup. Not sorry, the World Cup. I should not have said that in World War One. And so that's his contact with Africans. When the World Cup starts, it's just for Europeans and Latin Americans, really, and the US plays in the first World Cup. But the African and Asians are excluded, really, from World Cups until the 80s, really.
And he really didn't like amateur sports. He was very critical of the Olympics, the spirit of the Olympics.
Yeah, so, upper class Frenchmen of the time are creating the Olympics under the leadership of a baron, Baron de Coubertin. And they have this idea of amateur sports. Sports should be played for its own reasons and not for money, which is the idea you had later in US college sports as well. And Rime, he comes from quite a simple background. He's from a peasant background. His parents moved to Paris and started a grocery store. And Rime says, no, if poor men, and of course soccer in those days is conceived of only for men, and women have been banned from playing soccer at the time. So Rime says, if poor men are going to play soccer, they have to be paid for it. So from the very start, the World Cup is professional. You don't get any of this kind of amateurism or pretend amateurism that you get in US college sports or tennis or the Olympics. It's going to be professional and commercial from the very beginning.
The let's see, uh, the popularity of soccer is rising here in the U.S. is rising a lot since I was young, and it's still. I mean, there's a great team here in Detroit. There's the MLS. Uh, there are great inroads, but still, it doesn't feel like it's in the mainstream here. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I mean, football is by far the most popular sport in the US, your football, and basketball is number two. But if you look at third place, then soccer and baseball are actually very close. Now, Major League Soccer, the US League, is not very successful, not very popular. And below that, you have, I think, Detroit City play in the NASL league below that, and that's has some fans. But really, you got to see US soccer as a patchwork of lots of different things. You have the most popular women's game in the world. Beyond the MLS, a lot of Americans are watching the Premier League, watching the Mexican League, watching other foreign leagues. There's an enormous amount of youth soccer whereas there's very little kids playing football. And there's virtually no girls in the US playing football. Soccer is a much more popular sport to play. So, the measures I would look at would say that baseball and soccer are pretty much neck and neck, depending how you measure, for third sport in a massive country, which, given that soccer came from almost nowhere in the US, barely existed 50 years ago, is pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a fair amount of popularity. I felt like an outlier when I played as a kid. Uh, in the book, you were very you talked about each country has seemed to have their own style of football. Like Brazil, everybody wants to dance around, or
Mhm.
and then Holland, which you're big, and Dutch, you're big fan of. Uh, they have their own style, but yeah, did you seem to think, or you seem to like the newspaper and the online stuff, you indicate how everybody seems to play the same style.
Yeah,
Is
so you used to have national styles, and it was a joy of the World Cup that when you saw Brazil with, dribbling and kind of tricks was a big part of their soccer. And England, it was more muscular long ball football, and Holland, it was passing, soccer is geometry. And that was part of the joy that every kind of team represented a culture. And you don't have that anymore. At the top level, the styles converge. So everyone really has to play the same game. It's very athletic, it's very fast passing, you don't linger on the ball. Everyone attacks, everyone defends. And so now when you watch Italy or England or Brazil, the only way you can tell the teams apart is by their shirts. They play actually quite similar styles. So soccer has been globalized in the last 30 years because, on TV now, you watch everyone sees the best teams, whether you live in the Pacific Islands or you live in San Francisco or Shanghai, everyone watches Real Madrid and Liverpool and Manchester City and learns the best soccer. So these national styles die out, which is sad in a way, but they die out because they're not successful.
now speaking of shared experience, television has turned the World Cup into such. Do you think that changed the emotional and political meaning of the tournament?
I think what TV does is it's this incredible device for spreading soccer to new countries because soccer works very well on TV, whereas say baseball is not a great TV game. The baseball field is too big, the ball is too small. And soccer, you have this constant action. It's very simple to understand. It's called the simplest game. So when cable television starts broadcasting soccer around the world, you see countries start to fall for it. So it spreads into the biggest countries in the world, which before had really been it. Before the 90s had been immune to soccer. US, China, India, Indonesia. So soccer starts making inroads into those countries, which of course all have their own sports which stay popular. But television really turned soccer into the global game. Whereas when I was a kid in the 70s and I began watching the World Cup, as I say, the World Cup is a European, Latin American fest from which the rest of the world is excluded. The US doesn't have a team when I began watching in the 70s. And then in 1990, my first World Cup, the US sends a team of college boys. And now the US is present at almost every World Cup. And soon I think China and India will be as well. So TV is what turns it into the global game.
Yeah, I remember watching in the 80s the World Cup games as a kid on the Canadian TV station that we get here, not the American.
No, no.
So, I mean, okay, so the soccer is globalized, everybody plays the same style, but are there teams to look out for in this year's tournament?
Yeah, so it's almost impossible to pick the winner because it's quite a random game. Most soccer games are decided by one goal. So the ball that hits the post and goes out, or the ball that hits the post and goes in decides sometimes who wins the World Cup, or it's decided on penalties. So I've stopped being so stupid as to predict a winner. Spain are the best team probably now, but that doesn't mean they're going to win because of luck. Other teams that I think are highly competitive would be Argentina, France, England, and maybe Brazil just behind that.
Yeah, it seems there's uh, you also described how a lot of the players come from multicultural backgrounds, and that really has, so they may be from Morocco, but they were born in France. A lot of cultural differences. Do you think how much of an impact do you think that is on uh, how nations view their soccer teams, I guess?
Well, I'd say two things there. So the most of the strongest teams are from Western Europe, and they're largely staffed by players of immigrant origin. So I live in France, and most of the players, the last few World Cups, and France is very strong always, are of African or North African Arabic descent, and they grew up in the suburbs of Paris mostly. And so it's a non-white team, and in a country with a very strong far right movement, which is a kind of pro-white movement, that causes a lot of discussion and sometimes controversy, like why is our white country. Some people on the far right say represented by this non-white team. And you have versions of that in England, Germany, Holland. A lot of the players are of immigrant origin. Now, countries like the US or Morocco have in common that the best players are from Western Europe. So, what the US and many African teams do is they recruit players who have American or Moroccan passports, but who were born and raised in Germany or Holland, for example. So, Serginho Dest, the American right back, he's a Dutch boy. He grew up in the Netherlands, learned his soccer there, but his father is part American. So he's playing for the US at this World Cup. Marek Tillman, brilliant US midfielder. He was born and raised in Germany, but he had an American dad. So Morocco does the same. A lot of their players are from Moroccan origin families, but grew up in France, Germany, Holland, Spain. And it's interesting that Western Europe, which is, a small part of the world, 5% of the world's population, produces the best players, so that even a massive country like the US is drawing on its diaspora. This small amount of Americans born in Western Europe are disproportionately important in your team. So, yeah, I guess it also raises questions like who is an American? And of course, immigration is a huge political debate in the US, as in many countries. So often, when people see their national team, when the national anthem is played at a World Cup and you see those 11 guys and they represent your country, it causes people to think, well, what is our country? What is the US? What is France? What is Brazil? And those, of course, are controversial questions. What should our country be? And those are often fought out through soccer and the national soccer team.
Well, yeah, that's it. Also, I was kind of surprised how you detail that it's hard to discover players, new players in soccer because the field, every all the if you're good, you're going to come out. You're going to be found out. There's
If you're
no
good, we already know you now. If you're a really good player, it's almost certain that you're playing for a big club in Europe that is regularly on TV. So when you come to the World Cup, we already know you.
Yeah, there's the right, exactly. Uh, let's
And that didn't used to be that way. So when I began watching and you'd see a team like Brazil or Argentina, these were guys who still played in the Brazilian or the Argentinian league. As a European, you had no idea who they were. So you would discover at a World Cup, you discover these great players you never heard of. It was part of the thrill of World Cups, but that's now gone.
yeah, it seems also like the World Cup brings out the ideal version or the hopeful version, the host country for a short time. Can you describe the journeys or what's involved in that, say, like South Africa went through to build all these stadiums and all these infrastructure for the tournament?
Yeah, so the way I phrase it is hosting a World Cup is like a family hosting a wedding. You invite a lot of guests, and the guests they're coming to see the family as well, and they'll come away with a judgment on the family, like how did they host that wedding? Did it go well? Did the family get on? Was the venue nice? Was the food good? And so they'll make a judgment of the family based on the wedding. And when a country hosts a World Cup, it's like that. So suddenly the whole world has its eyes in 2010 on South Africa, in 2014 on Brazil, countries that are not often in the eye of the world. And so each country has its own anxieties about, what will the world see? Will the world approve of us? Like a family hosting a wedding. And in South Africa in 2010, the anxiety was, well, can we organize well? Can we be a kind of what they call a world-class country with world-class stadiums and infrastructure and organization? So a lot of anxieties about how the world sees Africa in general were played out in South Africa before that World Cup. In Brazil in 2014, it was, is the rich world, is FIFA going to tell us how to spend our money and how to organize it? We want to show our true Brazilian culture with our different kind of soccer nets and our different kind of soccer and our different stadiums. So it was kind of this drama of Brazilian culture faced with this globalizing force of FIFA, which is like kind of global capitalism telling Brazil what to do. In the US, I think the big drama in the US, because the US is always in the eyes of the world, the US is not so worried really about what the world will think of it, because you're used to the world watching you, especially nowadays. I think the drama in the US will be this is a family that's at war with itself. There is a pro-Trump America, there is an anti-Trump America. America in my lifetime has never been so divided. And I think a lot of that will be played out through the World Cup. I mean, you're going to have 11 host cities where most voters in every city voted Democratic in 2024 and are more Democratic now than they were then. And you have a president who wants to be at the center of the World Cup, wants to be in the news cycle every day. So, for example, if he went to a stadium, which I don't think he will, he would be booed. That's also why Trump didn't go to the Super Bowl in February, because he didn't want to be booed because his popularity is waning. So I think the World Cup will be an America versus America event in which what the rest of the world thinks will not really be a big preoccupation of Americans.
Yeah, yeah. What were what were some all throughout the tournaments or the span of the tournaments that you went? What are the were your favorite memories of them? Or what did you like about like some things that you liked about them?
You know, people always expect you to talk about moments on the field, but for me, I love soccer, but the best moments are away from the field. The best moments are when you get to a town that you've never been to before, you'll never go to again, and you think, my gosh, I'm here. Like I'm in the Amazon for 36 hours in 2014 to watch an England-Italy game. The game is fine. Italy win. I'm working all the time at World Cups, journalists work 16, 18 hours a day, every day. And then one morning I'm there, I have an hour and a half free, and I go for a walk in the city of Manaus, and I turn a corner and there is the Amazon River. And I have a few minutes and I sit by the Amazon and I put my hand in the water, and this guy is washing his hair in the river and chickens are roaming in the river. And I think this is amazing. I'm in the Amazon, the only time in my life. Or I was in Russia in 2018. So many astonishing memories also because now it's unthinkable that a Westerner could get into Russia. But I walked across the battlefield of Stalingrad, which was the biggest battlefield in World War II. I think more than 1 million men were killed there, Russian and German. And I'm walking along the battlefield of Stalingrad, looking at all the memorials with England soccer fans and some Russian fans and Tunisian fans. It was the day of England, Tunisia. And we were just awed by the size of this immense battlefield, by the memory of the people who died there. And then in the distance, you could see this gleaming new World Cup stadium where we were going to the game that night. But the World Cup felt very small then. So it's the people you meet, the places you'll never go to again. Those are, I think, what I'll always remember about the World Cup. So in the book, I try and talk about the football, but I also try and talk about what happens away from the soccer.
Oh yeah, yeah. You share your experiences there and how yeah that is work, and sometimes you need to take a break from the soccer uh, games back and forth. On the other hand, what are your least favorite memories, or what d- were there things you didn't like in certain tournaments?
I think most journalists tend to go crazy, crack up towards the end of a World Cup because you're working so hard every day. I mean, it sounds journalists shouldn't complain about being at World Cups, but we do. You go to the stadium, you're 5 or 6 hours in the press center, media center. There's only men there, almost only men, pushing and shoving each other, tiny space. You go and see a game. It's often a bad game that you don't really care about, like Paraguay, Japan, 0-0. And then you have to rush back to your hotel, grab your stuff, go and queue at an airport, fly to a different city. You get into a new hotel room at 1 in the morning. You have to be up at 6 in the morning. That's kind of that's the hard side of a World Cup. So towards the end of a World Cup, I have to admit, I often end up counting the hours till I can go home, collapse, and usually I have a vacation after a World Cup because I'm just done.
Yeah, yeah, I get that impression from the book. Uh, Now, you grew up uh, until you were 7, correct me if I'm wrong, in South Africa, and
Well,
then
my
you,
parents had left South Africa, so I used to visit family there, but I've never lived there, but I feel very close to the country because we would always go back and visit relatives. But I grew up
oh,
until I was 6, mostly in London, and then 9 or 10 years in the Netherlands. So kind of my love of
oh,
soccer was
okay,
formed in the Netherlands.
okay, yeah, okay, that brings up a point how in the Netherlands there are soccer clubs everywhere. You said there's for kids, they're bouncing a ball, they're kicking a ball all the time. But yet in South Africa and other places, there really isn't such clubs. Uh, how do you think that? How do you how did that impact you, I guess, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it impacted me in the Netherlands because we moved into the streets. I'm 6, 7 years old. My brother and I go out onto the street, and every night on the street, then still, there were not as many cars then as later. There would be the kids would play a soccer game after dinner. And so I fall for this amazing sport. And then it turns out everyone, all the boys anyway, because girls didn't play in those days in the Netherlands, all the boys belonged to clubs. So we joined clubs. And so my whole youth in the Netherlands was around the soccer club. And in Western Europe, that's totally normal. There's soccer clubs everywhere. Here in Paris, my kids played for them. They train you very well. They teach you soccer. I lived in the US when I was 10, 11. My father's an academic, and we lived in Palo Alto, California, because he was attached to Stanford University. And in Palo Alto, this is 1980, 81, we joined soccer clubs, and there were soccer clubs there. I realized that Americans didn't understand how to play soccer the way they understand football or basketball. So soccer is a game, as my hero, the Dutchman Johan Cruyff said, soccer is a game you play with your head. Soccer is all about where should I be now? It's a thinking game. And just like football and basketball are thinking games, as well as being athletic contests. And I realized that Western Europeans, especially Dutch people, understood how to think soccer better than Americans did. And that hasn't hugely changed. So playing in these different countries, I saw that each country had its own way of playing and understanding soccer. And then as I got to know poorer countries, South Africa, I saw there's very few clubs. There's very few organized places where kids can learn and be taught soccer. In China and India, why are these two biggest countries in the world so bad at soccer? Well, go around a big Chinese or Indian city, there's virtually no fields. There's no way you can play almost. There are no people to train you in proper soccer. And that's also why Africa has fallen behind. In African cities, they've been built up, cars everywhere nowadays, no clubs, no places to play, almost none. And so that's why Western Europe, this very small part of the world, because it has soccer clubs where 6-year-olds can learn the game, is still predominant in soccer.
I love uh, how the thinking man that reminded me how your your book helped me to understand the game better because of uh, how how you play the game. Is that one team is geometric things. You got to be a triangle, be it like angles. Some teams play where you get right up involved in the other team. It was very interesting. I appreciated that.
Thank you.
So, uh, now a couple more things. You talk about the corruption in FIFA, how the Qatar and Russia were chosen as hosts. I guess wanted and you talked with the former president or had interview with the former president of
Yes.
FIFA, Sepp Blatter. Do you think in his mind, he was doing what he thought was best for soccer, or is it just purely selfish means or selfish things?
I think the thing about Sepp Blatter, who was FIFA president for 17 years, little Swiss guy, is that he loved power. And that was really what did it for him. He wanted to control this global organization, and he did it partly by corrupting the people around him. So other people would get kickbacks. You sell the television rights to the World Cup for, let's say, Central America, and you sell them for 100 million, and the TV company puts a few million into your own bank account. That's why a lot of these guys made money. So a lot of the people around Blatter in FIFA were taking bribes, kickbacks. And he didn't really care about money. That wasn't his thing. He just wanted to control the thing. And to have power, it helps for the other people around you to be corrupted. Because if you don't like someone, if somebody becomes a problem, you just say, oh, well, I have evidence that you took kickbacks, so we're going to kick you out the organization. So that was the way he held power in it for 17 years. And the thing is, I mean, what I talked to Blatter about in part, there's this crucial moment in the history of the World Cup where December 2nd, 2010 in Zurich, they vote on who gets to host two World Cups, 2018 and 2022. And people expect Russia will get 2018, and the United States is going to be hosting the World Cup 2022. But the vote goes differently. The names come out of the envelope, and it's Russia for 2018 and Qatar, not the US, for 2022. And there are gasps in the room. And everybody realizes at that time, well, Qatar particularly and Russia also got the World Cup in part because bribes were paid to FIFA top executives to vote for these countries. And 5 years later, the FBI rolls up FIFA executives at a posh hotel in Zurich where they're meeting. And that's this big crisis in FIFA. So the moment when Qatar and Russia are given the World Cups, that's what I talked to Blatter about as this kind of moment, A, when everybody realizes, my gosh, this organization was totally corrupt. And secondly, when people realize soccer power has shifted to the new world, it shifted away from Europe and Latin America and even the Western powers like the US, it shifted to Eastern powers, Russia and the Gulf countries. And I think what we saw there in soccer in 2010, it prefigured a shift in power outside soccer that we've seen since, that the Gulf countries and Russia have become really powerful actors in this new world that we're all struggling to understand.
Do you think that their power will continue?
I think Russia not. I mean, Russia is a country that has overextended itself in war, a country with barely an economy, a country which has kind of sent all its disposable young men, the ones it regards as disposable, to be killed in Ukraine. Power of the Gulf, I mean, is now hugely under pressure because Iran is bombing these countries and Qatari gas fields have been hit. So we're actually seeing a lot of global power being thrown up into the air in the last 2 months. And everything we thought overturned. But suddenly it's the Gulf where you have a few royal families with unimaginable wealth in oil and gas reserves, which have used a lot of that wealth to buy soccer. So Qatar got the World Cup 2022. Saudi Arabia will get it in 2034. Saudi Arabia is pumping huge amounts of money into soccer. So in soccer, at least, these Gulf countries have become preeminent. America has come in as well. A lot of American private equity people have bought the biggest European clubs. So we're seeing a lot of the kind of shifting global power. We're seeing that reflected in soccer. And one great thing about soccer and World Cups is so much about the world is reflected in what happens in soccer.
Yeah, you talked about how meaningful, how powerful, how you remember the Dutch when the uh, team when they played in games. Uh, do you still? I guess you're still rooting for Holland, or that's your number one team, right?
Holland is totally my team. Yeah, my children feel a bit sorry for me because they're France fans. They were born and raised here. And so my twin sons won the World Cup, as it were, when they were 9 years old in 2018. So they've already surpassed me as fans. I told them this is the peak. It's not going to get any better. But yeah, of course I support Holland because like in any sport, being a fan, it connects you to your childhood. So when I see Holland play in the orange shirts that haven't really changed in my lifetime, I'm 8 years old again, and I'm watching the World Cup 1978 on television in the family living room with my parents and grandparents. So that's a beautiful thing about fandom. When you watch a World Cup, you become 8 years old again. And everyone remembers their first World Cup as well. So I remember 78. And I would say to everyone who has children in their life who's watching this, make sure that you watch the games with the right people, bring the right people, the right friends, the right families to watch, because your children will never forget their first World Cup. And they'll always remember who they watched it with, and they'll remember those moments. So it's a crucial life moment. So parents, be very careful to do it right.
Oh, that's so neat. It feels, yeah. I mean, like when the Detroit Tigers won the World Series, that was very meaningful
Of course. Yeah.
to us. But it almost seems like it's that much more when it's the country involved. Uh,
Kind of. I mean, look, the Tigers brings together a city and a region, and the national team of a country like Holland brings together a whole country. And both are beautiful emotions. But whereas you can't really explain the Tigers to people from Cameroon, you could explain Holland to people from Cameroon. They'll know exactly what you're talking about. It's a
oh yeah,
worldwide language.
Good point. Good point. So in conclusion, if you could show a young reader one World Cup match to understand how football tells the story of the world, which would it be and why?
I would say it's a World Cup match I watched on TV when I was 12 years old. It was France, West Germany. And this is 1982. And so it's not that long after World War II. So every middle-aged person and older in France and in Western Europe, they remembered World War II and they remembered German occupation, they remembered German brutality. And that match brings it all back. Germany was an ugly team at the time, they were a hated team, and their goalkeeper does a karate kick on this French player that sends him to hospital, broken ribs, broken teeth. The guy never, his body never really recovers, even to this day. And France are the beautiful team, but Germany beat them on penalties. And so this is a game in 1982, and it sounds ridiculous, but to me as a 12-year-old watching, I understood that it was echoes of World War II. And I think most people in Europe, in France and beyond, felt that. And it sounds crazy that a soccer match can do that, but it really does. So soccer matches go beyond the teams. They take in, some of them, the whole history of the country. So a game like Poland against the Soviet Union is a story of, Poland was occupied by the Soviets in 1982 as well. This game means so much more than soccer. When Senegal, the former colony of France, beats France, its former colonial master in 2002. That's the thing about World Cups. The whole history of the country takes the field with the team. It sounds ludicrously overblown, but it is really true.
Yeah, I'm starting to understand it. Yeah, I get it. So, uh, people online, if you have a question, throw in the chat or the Q&A. I'll get started. Now, the 2026 edition of Psychonomics is going to be released in about 5, 6 weeks here in the US.
Yeah.
Anything uh, in the book that you want to highlight, like really jumped out at you? I've had the good fortune of talking with Professor Stefan Szymanski one of his books. So he's a great guy. And did you both find anything interesting that really
There
jumped
was so
out
much
at
news
you?
to say. We've updated the book massively. We took out wrong predictions, put in new predictions. We have a whole new chapter on Major League Soccer and whether it's been a success. And you're right. My co-writer on the book is Stefan Szymanski, and this book has a Michigan angle because Stefan is a professor of economics at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. He's a big Detroit City fan. So he talks about Detroit also in the book and about the kind of broad spread of American soccer, which goes way beyond the MLS. We talk about how men's soccer should pay reparations to women's soccer because amazingly, women's soccer was banned in many countries for 50 years. We ask why the US has never caught up, something that in the first Soccernomics we predicted. We said the US would be a future king of soccer, and it hasn't become in men's soccer. So we ask that question, why did that not happen? Why have the Americans, but also the Africans and the Asians not caught up with the Europeans? And we have a lot in the book about trading players, the transfer market. Why do clubs do it so badly? How could they do it better? Could they learn from baseball teams, which pioneered the use of data in trading? So we've updated the book with loads of new stories, Soconomics, and every 4 years we do that. It's an enormous pain, but it's also great fun to do the update.
Well, I think it is neat how you take the Moneyball approach to it, that you show data that can be applied to not just to baseball teams, it could be applied to soccer teams and probably any other teams.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, when I first met Stefan, he said we should do a Moneyball of soccer, and the book we ended up with, Zoconomics, is not a Moneyball of soccer; it's different. But I, in part, learned a lot from talking to Billy Beane, who's the hero of Moneyball. So Billy was general manager of the Oakland A's in baseball for a very long time. He's now kind of moved on from that, and he's become an investor in a couple of soccer clubs in Europe, in England, and in the Netherlands. And he's fascinated by the idea of transferring these data methods from baseball to soccer. So in baseball, you can use data to identify undervalued players, and the A's did that brilliantly for a while. And he's doing the same in soccer with some success, and he's encouraging others. There's a lot of people in soccer who have learned from Billy and from Moneyball and have tried to imitate that. In baseball, I would say stats have been more transformative than in soccer, but in soccer, all the big teams do now look at new forms of data all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. So anybody else have a question for Mr. Kuper? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Simon. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. And good luck with it. And I hope you have a good tournament, good experiences, I should say, in the tournament when you come here.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope everyone here has a great World Cup.
Very good. Have a good night, I should say.
Yes. Thank you.